This month on 219 West, they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. How a small demonstration against corporate greed is sweeping the nation.
Economic uncertainty has paralyzed many small business owners, but one entrepreneur in Queens is optimistic about the future.
I feel that, by having maintained our company lean, that we should be able to ride it out if, quote, there's a second recession.
From bits and bytes to bed and breakfast, one pioneering B&B operator is fighting with the big boys.
They market and people go and it's a great price. They come back very rapidly because they actually want this. They want something different.
While people are finding ways to cut costs, some baby boutiques are bucking the trend in retail sales. How a little child may lead the way out of the recession. I'm Brenda-Lise Gonzalez.
I'm Judy Lee.
I'm Kalia Laney.
And I'm Erica Robinson. Welcome to 219 West. We'll have those stories, plus to the debate over Palestinian statehood and moving beyond 9/11. A group of comedians discuss when it's safe to return to comedy after a tragedy. Economists say the recession ended 2 years ago, but people from Wall Street to Main Street are still worried about the fragile state of the economy. From the halls of Congress to the union halls, even to the classrooms, people are voicing their dissatisfaction with the lack of jobs, access to health care, and slow business growth. What began as a small demonstration against corporate greed on Wall Street is now a nationwide movement. Occupy! Shut it down! The young and the old and everyone in between are occupying Wall Street to voice their economic concerns.
I know people who work 2 or 3 jobs and can't sustain, they have to choose between feeding their family or paying their mortgage.
Protesters say they're the 99% of the nation taken advantage of by the country's wealthiest 1%.
We are trying to get justice in our economy and to make the very, very rich pay taxes.
Besides wanting the rich to pay a fair share, demonstrators have lists of demands.
We hope that the millionaire's tax will be expanded and that the stimulus package from President Obama be passed.
And protests are spreading all over.
People are all coming here from all over the country, and this right here is starting to trickle down into Occupy Amherst, where I'm from, Occupy Boston, that all these little microcosms are causing these conversations.
The sub-movement Occupy the Hood was created to get more people of color to join the fight.
All these big corporations that are just sucking resources out of the hood. The money isn't going back into the community and the community members, and people aren't being able to have true ownership of their community.
With people affected across all color lines, the goal is to take the fight to the top.
Where I see Occupy Wall Street going is ever increasing until we get to the leadership in this country.
But will the protest usher in change in Washington? That remains to be seen. This is Erica Robinson for 219 West.
While much of the country remains uncertain about the state of the economy, one Queens business owner isn't letting pessimism stand in her way. She says it's not only the recession that's undermining economic growth, but fear. Whatever the case, the business owner still has big hopes for small business. When Amparo Connors opened her doors on Queens Boulevard in Forest Hills 12 years ago, she was one of 7 staffing companies in the office building. Today, she's the only one left.
Not just this building, in our industry, the attrition rate of staffing companies has been tremendous.
Now, with unemployment stubbornly high, Wall Street slashing jobs and salaries, and worries about global debt default, small businesses are bracing for a double-dip recession. But Connors and many of her clients are gearing up to expand. The Queens-based small business owner says things aren't as bad as they seem. She says fear, more than anything else, is stunting economic growth.
So I think it's not listening to the headlines, not listening to what's going on in Europe, and just understanding that the business is improving.
A September 2011 National Federation of Independent Business survey found that optimism among small business owners has dropped for the 6th month in a row. The survey was issued about the same time that Congress averted the debt and default crisis. Though a deal was reached, the political scuffle dealt a blow to the economy. Many business owners cut back expanding and hiring, but Mike Durant, New York State Director for the National Federation of Independent Businesses, says lack of confidence isn't the only issue.
How can you create jobs and make the country, or even talking specifically in New York more viable if the state agencies are developing more regulations that are going to be costly and prohibit job expansion and creation? It's not going to happen.
Durant says that tax incentives and loan programs are nice, but that small business owners really need leadership in Washington and less costly regulation. Others in the small business community wouldn't mind more government initiatives. Devon Prello, a real estate development agent, says city programs have been instrumental in getting his South Bronx grocery store off the ground.
One is the Small Business and Service Solutions. Very good in terms of resources. They've actually helped me find my legal counsel. They sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together for me at a very cheap sort of rate. Helped me find an accountant that was sort of, in a corporate setting, but, did it pro bono. Legal advice as well. In terms of training, they'll hopefully be able to help with staff training.
But Prello is still missing a key component of his business plan, operating capital.
My challenge is now, and it will be for the next month to 2 months, is trying, with my financial team and advisors to try to secure close to $250,000, $300,000 in operational costs to actually get the ball rolling.
Prello remains confident and is sure he can secure the funding. Attendees at the recent Queens College Business Forum luncheon were less confident. Of about 150 attendees, no more than 5 were planning to hire. Of those hiring, 2 businesses were in an industry that Connors wants to break into: tourism.
Particularly in Queens, there's a lot of new hotels that are coming up, and hotel and entertainment also, like the Aqueduct project that's coming up in Jamaica, so that there's a lot of opportunity there for new jobs.
Despite looking to growing industries, Connors is by no means naive about the current economic situation.
There's an argument that this recession has not ended. That's what most people feel, the people on Main Street, middle class. And I agree to some extent, but I feel that by having maintained our company lean, that we should be able to ride it out if, quote, there's a second recession. We've learned from the past, and I think that companies in general that have survived are in that same position.
And while Connors is placing more people, she says most of those jobs are still temporary.
And, in a good economy, we had a balance 50-50. 50% of our business was temp, 50 was direct hire or permanent. In a bad economy, you'll see like 75 to 90% temporary. We're now at about, let's say, 75% temp, and the other 25 is the permanent direct hire. So we really want to shift that, but that's where a lot of positions are temp to hire now.
One barrier to hiring that is more tangible than psychological is access to cash, but that may be changing. In late September, some of the country's largest banks committed $20 million to small businesses. Small Business Administration, or SBA-backed loans, are also up this year. They've increased by $18 million, which is a 48% increase from last year. Perhaps Connors' optimistic economic outlook is spot on. For 219 West, this is Kalia Laney.
We've just heard about one entrepreneur looking toward tourism to grow a business. Here's another. Margaret Canick went from making computer programs to making breakfast when she opened a B&B in Brooklyn. 5 years ago, she faced little competition. Now, the big chains are moving in and she's not backing down. Elizabeth Canick calls 168 Bergen Street home. For the last 5 years, she's also called the brownstone on Boerum Hill a business.
One of the things that got me started was an article I read in the Brooklyn paper saying that Brooklyn needs a bed and breakfast industry.
Then a vice president of technology at Morgan Stanley, Canick sold her Upper West Side co-op apartment in 2003 and bought the house for just over $1 million.
And I was lucky because I bought the house right before the crash. And at that time, credit was easy, and I'd had a good job for 11 years and excellent credit.
3 mortgages, and 3 years later, Escape Guest House opened its doors.
I filled out every single free offer of these. This was in the days when you would get the sign here, 0 interest for the first year. You name it, I did it. I asked people for money. I just scraped it together.
Most of her guests are out-of-towners in to visit family.
That's my ideal market because they come repeatedly and they have the money to stay here. They have the money to take their kids out to the neighborhood restaurants.
I definitely was looking for something that was less than $300, and it's hard to do when you come to New York. I believe it's $225 for my room. It was kind of on a special.
Built in the 1850s, Escape has 5 bedrooms, a common area, a full kitchen, and a garden in the back. In September-October, a single costs $195. A double runs $100 more.
And still make money, and that's my goal. My goal is just to make more money than my best month ever.
There are lower-priced options a couple of blocks north at 3B Bed and Breakfast.
It's too cheap right now, so we're like booked up like 2 months in advance, which is like a good problem to have, but stressful for us.
Matthew Keeson is one of a group of 8 Brooklynites who run 3B B&B. They rent the 3rd floor of the building for $6,800 a month. That floor serves as the 4 rooms of the B&B.
Which is essentially our goal, to have somewhere that's really cheap and nice for people to stay, that really is just authentic for the region.
Escape and 3B aren't the only accommodations in the area. There are more than a dozen within walking distance of downtown Brooklyn.
The more I improved, the more I realized that actually I was competing with the Marriott.
This year, about 40% of the city's hotel openings will be in boroughs beyond Manhattan.
Hi, Casey. Thanks for coming over.
Brooklyn is such like a hot brand right now, but so many people cashing in on it are just selling like this marketer's idea of Brooklyn, like the hotels down the street that are super expensive. Like Sheridan has, I think, like pictures of the Brooklyn Bridge in every hotel room.
Brooklyn is more than its famous bridge. Last year, almost 49 million people visited New York City. The influx of tourists contributes to the hotel boom in the outer boroughs, and Brooklyn is no exception.
They market and people go and it's a great price. They come back very rapidly because they actually want this. They want something different.
The charms of bed and breakfasts are found in the finishing touches. Unlike a generic hotel room, the pictures, plants, and even koi ponds make the place a home. For 219 West, Judy Lee, Boerum Hill, Brooklyn.
New York City has a long reputation as the nation's fashion capital. Now, there's a growing group of fashionistas, children under the age of 5. As residents decide to stay in the city and raise their families, they've created a boom in children's boutiques. We've taken a peek into this niche market to examine who's failed, who succeeded, and whether or not the weak economy is baby-proof.
You won't find any frills, pinks, or baby blues in this store. That's because Jennifer Katawi, owner of Babeston Tribeca, prefers a more non-traditional selection for parents.
Rock and roll, pop culture-driven, independent designers, things that you wouldn't find in a big box store, things that you wouldn't find most places.
The tax attorney turned shop owner began an online baby store in 2004. And 4 years later, right in the middle of the recession, decided to buck another trend by opening an on-site boutique. Not exactly a big box store, but a retail establishment nonetheless.
When the recession, kind of was in full swing, we took the opposite strategy and expanded.
Today, profits are up 20%, and she's even opened another shop, Babesta Cribs, just 2 blocks away.
One of Babesta's top sellers are their custom designed graphic tees at $25. Using a trademark like this one is one way that experts say a small business can set itself apart from the competition.
Great product is really everything. Consumers are always interested in product.
Manhattan has seen a baby boom in the past decade. Now 1 in every 20 New Yorkers is under the age of 5. More affluent neighborhoods like Tribeca and Soho are catering to a new group of mini shoppers.
I think it has shifted over the years from dressing children as children to dressing children more as mini adults. That's been a trend that's been going on for quite some time. Boys wearing more graphic t-shirts and girls as well versus sort of more traditional kind of polo tops. The children's market tends to be more recession-proof than the women's and men's apparel markets because people can forego buying clothing for themselves, but they'll continue to spend on their children.
Even though people are still buying, sales in children's boutiques have declined as consumers look for bargains.
Cheap has become chic, even for the higher-end consumer.
Heavy competition hasn't helped either. There's been a 4% decrease in children's retail. Small business owners new to the industry have seen the worst of it.
Many entrepreneurs think that they understand a retail business, for instance, or a restaurant business because they've shopped or eaten in a restaurant. And, you know, they wouldn't go out and try to do something like open a steel mill, but they'll open up a store.
Going online may be the safest bet for stores in an uncertain market.
The stores that start as stores and establish themselves as a brand in the consumer's mind and then go online, I believe, have an advantage.
Katawi credits being online for keeping business strong in a weak economy.
I think our online has been crucial to our business, even our local business. I see that people shop online first, but they still may crave and need that personal connection. I mean, a lot of kids don't want to be in a stroller that long, but I think during the winter...
It's the connection with her customers that helps keep her mind off the competition.
You know, there's so much competition out there. I don't just think of local competition. I mean, competition is the world right now. It's hard to stay focused on them. You really have to kind of stay focused on yourself and be mindful of what everybody is doing.
It's never enough.
It's a sign that New York's fashionistas can come in the smallest of sizes. For 219 West, Brenda Lise Gonzalez in Manhattan.
Coming up after the break, will Palestine become the UN's 194th member state? Residents in one community in Brooklyn are weighing in. Palestinian statehood. That is the question up for debate in the UN Security Council, and the discussions could take months. While diplomats argue the issue in the United Nations, Palestinians in Brooklyn are carrying on their own passionate discussions. 3 activists in Bay Ridge have different political views, but one thing they share is a longing for their homeland, 6,000 miles away.
Israel was created on a land of indigenous people, just like the U.S. was. The only problem is the Palestinians didn't go away.
Activist Riham Barghouti, a high school teacher in Bay Ridge, was born in Queens and lived in Palestine for 10 years. There, she witnessed the violence of the Second Intifada, or uprising, in 2000. Dr. Ahmed Jaber, a retired doctor and community leader in Bay Ridge, was born in Palestine in 1947, 1 year before Israel was created.
We cannot replace it, we cannot erase it from our blood.
Lamise Deek, a human rights lawyer, holds bittersweet memories of her homeland.
Our snacks were pomegranates and blueberries and, a very healthy way of life. Again, Israeli occupation excluded, but it's something that, of course, we at the time had come to acclimate to in whatever way human beings are able to do.
The transition to life in New York wasn't easy for Lamise, who moved to Bay Ridge as a child to follow her father, who had been forced to leave by the Israelis.
Coming to a society that was not welcoming of us on any level, not from our neighbors, not in the schools, not in the government, from leaving, land and a self-sustaining type of lifestyle to living in pretty much absolute poverty.
Last month, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas submitted a bid to the UN for membership and eventual statehood. Here in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, home of the second largest Arab community outside of Dearborn, Michigan, there was widespread support for the goal, however, differing views on the tactical approach.
What it does not include is 2/3 of the Palestinian people, perhaps more than 2/3 of the Palestinian people. What it does not include is one contiguous land.
Dr. Jaber sees statehood as an important step toward resolving the long-standing impasse in the Middle East.
I believe this step has to be taken because the negotiations, which they claim is the basis for reaching out to a statehood, has been stalled for almost a whole year.
Riham supports the bid in theory, but not in practice.
Whether it was in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, whether it was among Palestinian refugees, whether it was among Palestinians living inside Israel, there was no discussion among civil society in terms of not even a referendum or some kind of, debate or transparency.
Today, all three activists lament the difficulties in preserving their right to return to their homeland under Israeli occupation.
Up until the 90s, my family and I, even despite our financial difficulties, had to go back to Palestine every year for the entire summer, or otherwise risk the possibility of losing our ability to return ever again.
Reham was able to obtain a Palestinian identity card and has returned twice in the past 5 years.
Checkpoints are still very much in place. It's very difficult to travel from even one place to another inside the West Bank. And people are very frustrated.
Dr. Jabber was attending medical school in Iraq during the 1967 war, a pivotal moment marking which Palestinians could receive Palestinian IDs. Since Iraq was considered hostile to Israel, he was denied such a card and now travels on a U.S. passport, which limits where he can visit within the occupied territories.
The government are afraid of those Palestinians to come back. So I'm not welcome to go even as a tourist. And they, every time I go for a visit, they have 300 questions, and what are you doing here, and where are you going?
Regardless of the outcome of the application for UN membership, all three activists agree the struggle will continue long after the diplomats have taken sides. For Reham Barghouti, Lamis Deek, and Ahmed Jabber, that means a divided reality, living here and dreaming of there. Alva French, Bay Ridge, Brooklyn.
Tragedy and comedy. In ancient Greek theatre, these were two completely separate genres. Today it seems almost any event, no matter how serious, is ripe for ribbing. Or is it? What happens to comedy and satire during and after a tragedy like 9/11? Shortly after the Twin Towers fell, Vanity Fair editor Graydon Carter proclaimed the end of irony. Comedy shows were cancelled, and late-night comedians wondered how the show was going to go on. The Late Show with David Letterman went back on air on September 17, 2001, with Letterman questioning his role and judgment as the host of an entertainment show.
Watching all of this, I wasn't sure that I should be doing a television show, because to come to this circumstance that is so desperately sad, I don't trust my judgment in matters like this.
Jon Stewart expressed a similar concern.
It's another entertainment show beginning with an overwrought speech of a shaken host, and television is nothing if not redundant.
But go on they did, and soon the jokes came.
Because for 20 years we've been in the city, making fun of everything, making fun of the city, making fun of my hair, making fun of Paul, well.
They said to get back to work, and there were no jobs available for a man in the fetal position under his desk crying, which I gladly would have taken.
But comic Gilbert Gottfried didn't wait to use the event for a laugh. Appearing at a Friars Club roast of Hugh Hefner 3 weeks after 9/11, he joked that he had intended to catch a plane, but couldn't get a direct flight because they said they have to stop at the Empire State Building first. Audience members booed and shouting "too soon" in response. 10 years on, how do comedians and performers look back on the difficulty of how and when to make people laugh again? On the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, a group of performers held a political cabaret show in tribute to the day.
We will mold and shape our country, or it will not be molded or shaped at all. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times?
I'm joined in the studio with two performers from that event, Jessica Halem and Greg Wallach. Welcome to 219 West.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to start by asking you to think back to the first performance you both did after 9/11.
Well, that was 10 years, so I can barely remember much. The life of a performer involves a lot of forgetting. I was in Chicago, And I was performing at a club there, and I remember distinctly just trying to make people laugh. So I didn't necessarily talk about what was happening at that moment, but I really just tried to stick to the idea of bringing some levity and relief to that moment.
I had kind of the opposite experience. I remember I think it was the Bowery Poetry Club, and I got up and I did a rather kind of serious piece. And it wasn't 9/11 themed, but it was just sort of how I was feeling. And I remember someone in the audience afterwards coming up going, cheer up, and so it's funny, I just really went with where I was at. And I don't know if that was the best choice or not, but it felt the most appropriate at the time.
And how did then, 10 years on, when you did the tribute cabaret in September, how did that performance feel different from?
I feel like for me, it recreated the day in a lot of ways, and it made me realize how important ritual is as an artist and as a person working in a great community of people and artists. Because now when I look back at 9/11, I'll remember 9/11, but I'll also remember that we made this really wonderful event, and I was surrounded by, people that I so much admire and really love. And so it sort of retooled the day a little bit in my head, I think in a really healthy way.
Well, so much has changed in the last 10 years. I think that the piece that I really felt most from that night was really honoring all that has gone on in the past 10 years, and in many ways that's been quite horrific, which is two wars that continue to rage on in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I feel like that was a thread throughout the evening, was really sort of marking what shifted and potentially what has been extremely continuously destructive to us as a people, as a democracy. I talked a lot about Homeland Security measures and Supreme Court upholding just, really terrible infringements, I think, on our, human rights in the United States.
A firefighter came up to me after I did my piece in the show, and he said, I just want to thank you because I just wanted to spend tonight laughing and having a good time. And he said every year the media marks this day and tells me how I'm supposed to feel and sort of shoves it in my face in a certain way. And he goes, I just want to forget about it. I don't really want to have that day over and over again, because he's like, it was one of the worst days of my life. So he's like, I was really happy to come here tonight and just laugh and have a good time. And that was really special to me as a performer to have that firefighter say that.
And so looking to the future and looking up to today, how do you think comedy and political satire in particular has changed because of something as historic as 9/11?
Well, political satire is more important now than it ever has been. I think of anything, I think there's two parts about comedy. One is using comedy as a tool for saying some of the hardest things. So 9/11 is a perfect example of something that's so emotionally difficult on such a myriad of levels, but comedy is a good way to, I think, sometimes get at some of that in a way that's a relief, not allows you to be honoring of sort of the duality of the emotions, but get at some of, I think, the fierce political stuff that's going on around it. So comedy is a perfect tool for political satire in general, but for 9/11 I think is a great example. And I mean, like I say, there's now more than ever we need political satire as a way to talk about some of the really just really complicated issues that are going on right now.
And I think comedy in particular is a place where people really connect, because we laugh. We have this very sort of primal reaction, which is to laugh together, and it's where we join and where we agree in a certain way, and it doesn't feel so hard and like a push and a pull.
Right. It gets at some
like
of the
reaction.
nuances that isn't so issues aren't so either or when it comes to comedy.
Right.
I think it allows you to find some middle ground that I think so many of us are trying to find ways to connect with one another, whether it's on the same side of the political spectrum or within it, or all of it. So
well, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us about that.
Thanks.
That's it for this month's edition of 219 West from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. We'll be back next month with more stories from the 5 boroughs. Thank you for watching. I'm Jennifer Hamblett.